What if healing isn't just about getting better, but about losing everything that once made you feel safe? What if becoming whole means watching familiar faces disappear, one by one? No one tells you this. The moment you start healing, you begin to lose people. And not because you're pushing them away, but because you're no longer willing to betray yourself just to keep them close. This truth, echoed by Dr. Gabor Maté, strikes deep. Authenticity is the highest form of self-care, and sometimes it's a lonely road. Many people don't leave you because you've changed. They leave because you've stopped playing the role they needed you to play. You've stopped being the pleaser, the caretaker, the one who swallowed their needs in silence. Healing is not polite. It disrupts. It shakes the system. It dares to say, I choose myself, even if it costs me everything I once called love. And that is a terrifying, liberating, and deeply human path. Let's walk through it together. It doesn't happen all at once. The process begins quietly, like a slow turning of the tide. You start saying no when you used to say yes. You pause before apologizing for things that were never your fault. You stop laughing at jokes that feel like tiny stabs to your soul. And at first, it feels empowering. But soon comes the backlash. Not always loud, not always cruel. Sometimes it's just silence, coldness, a friend who stops calling, a partner who says, "You've changed." A family member who accuses you of being too sensitive, too distant, too selfish. And there it is. The first cost of healing. You begin to lose people who only loved the version of you that didn't love yourself. This is the hidden tax of personal growth. Not everyone will come with you. Some were attached not to your soul, but to your compliance. What you're grieving isn't just the person. It's the illusion you had of safety, acceptance, belonging. And yet, something else begins to grow in the cracks. Self-respect. Clarity. The quiet strength of integrity. Not everyone will celebrate your healing, but you weren't born to shrink to fit other people's comfort zones. You were born to become whole, even if the price is loneliness. At first, healing doesn't just change you, it changes the mirror you hold up to everyone around you. When you begin to face your wounds, honestly, painfully, bravely, you become a silent invitation for others to do the same. But not everyone wants that. Some people have spent a lifetime running from themselves, from childhood trauma, from shame, from truths too heavy to carry. They built their identity on denial, distraction, performance. So when you begin to break the cycle, to speak truth, to stop pretending, you become dangerous. Not because you're hurting anyone, but because you're no longer pretending that the wound isn't there. And that threatens their reality. You used to laugh with them about things that actually hurt you. You used to tolerate their emotional distance, their little cruelties, their subtle manipulations. You used to stay small so they could feel big. But now you see, you name what was once unspoken. You honor what was once denied. And for people who've built their life around not feeling, your presence becomes a trigger. They'll say, "You're different." They'll say you're difficult. But what they really mean is, "I don't know how to be with you now that you're being real." This is the part no one warns you about. Healing reveals who was only comfortable with your silence, who needed you to stay wounded so their story wouldn't be questioned. But healing was never about keeping others comfortable. It's about reclaiming your truth, even if it shakes everything around you. You don't owe anyone your denial, especially not those who fear their own reflection. Not every bond is born from love. Some are built from shared pain, unspoken agreements to keep each other from feeling alone in the dark, and in the beginning, that can feel like connection. You meet someone who understands your sadness, who mirrors your brokenness. You become close. fast. It feels deep, intense, maybe even sacred, but underneath, something fragile is holding it together. Unhealed wounds. You stay close because you fear being abandoned. They stay close because they need to be needed. You don't speak your needs clearly because they might leave. They don't express their truth because they don't know how. And so the dance begins. Two people orbiting each other's pain, mistaking familiarity for love. But healing changes the choreography. Suddenly, you want to speak honestly. You want healthier boundaries. You want a love that doesn't require self-betrayal to survive. And that's when the relationship begins to crack. Not because you stopped loving them, but because the foundation was never solid to begin with. It was built on fear, on trauma, on mutual invisibility. The moment you start choosing yourself, the spell breaks. You're no longer available to carry both your pain and theirs. You're no longer willing to shrink, appease, or emotionally bleed just to keep the peace. And they might say, "You're abandoning me." But what they really mean is, you're no longer playing the role I needed you to play. Some relationships only thrive when you're hurting, not out of cruelty, but because that's all they've ever known. Healing asks a painful question. Was this love, or was this survival dressed up as affection? And when the answer becomes clear, you grieve. You let go, and you open space for something more real to grow. You don't exist in isolation. You're part of a system. Family, friendships, marriage, workplace, and every system resists change. Think of it like a mobile hanging from the ceiling. Each piece balances the others. Even if one is crooked, the structure feels stable because it's familiar. But the moment one piece shifts, the whole mobile wobbles. And that's exactly what happens when you begin to heal. You start saying, "I'm not available 24/7 anymore. I need to be spoken to with respect. I won't sacrifice my well-being to keep this dynamic alive." And suddenly, the system feels threatened. People around you may push back, not because they're bad, but because they depended on the old version of you to stay intact. Your role was essential. The peacemaker, the caretaker, the one who kept their chaos from spilling over. But now you've stepped out of that role, and the unspoken contracts start to break. Mom feels rejected. Your partner feels confused. Your friend accuses you of acting superior. Why? Because healing breaks the pattern. And when a pattern breaks, people lose their footing. In truth, they're not angry at who you've become. They're scared they don't know how to relate to you anymore. You're not too much. You're not selfish. You're simply no longer willing to abandon yourself to maintain false peace, and yes, that shakes the system. But what's born in that shaking is freedom. Not the kind that comes easily, but the kind that comes with a deep, unwavering sense of self. You're not here to play a role in someone else's story. You're here to write your own, even if the system trembles while you do it. Not all losses come with a door slam. Some just fade. A text that goes unanswered. An invitation that never comes. A conversation that once flowed now turns cold, awkward, distant. At first, you wonder, did I do something wrong? You replay moments, question your tone, blame your growth. But then it hits you. You didn't break anything. You just stopped pretending. And in that quiet shift, the masks fall. Because when you begin to honor your truth, even gently, those who were only attached to your silence, your compliance, your pain, they step back. Not because you hurt them, but because your presence now carries clarity. And clarity is uncomfortable for people who depend on confusion to stay close. The silence that follows is loud. It echoes through your chest. It whispers, They were never really with you, only with the version of you that didn't ask for more. You thought they loved you, but what they really loved was the space you gave them to stay asleep. And now that you're awake, they disappear. Don't fight it. Let the silence speak. Let it purify. Let it reveal. Let it clear the stage for something real. Because silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's truth making space for something that finally sees you, fully, honestly, without condition. And when that arrives, you'll know the difference between being tolerated and being loved. There comes a moment in healing when even you begin to question yourself. You feel less tolerant of small talk. You don't rush to comfort people who cross your boundaries. You don't smile when something inside you says, no, and part of you wonders, am I losing my warmth, my softness, my empathy? But pause. Breathe. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming real. There's a difference between kindness and people-pleasing, between empathy and self-erasure. And for most of your life, those lines were blurred. You said yes to keep the peace. You absorbed moods, fixed problems, avoided conflict. You believed love meant sacrifice, no matter the cost. But healing rewrites that story. Now, when you feel discomfort, you don't ignore it. When something hurts, you name it. When someone oversteps, you choose truth over harmony. That's not coldness. That's clarity. Yes, your tolerance is lower. Not because you're bitter, but because your soul finally understands its worth. Yes, your circle is smaller. Not because you've pushed people away, but because you're no longer available for relationships that cost your peace. Yes, you've stopped over-explaining, because you've realized that being understood is not a prerequisite for being real, and some will call you distant, hard, selfish, but that's only because they were fed by your self-abandonment. And now that the meal is over, they're hungry for the old version of you. Let them starve. You are no longer a performance. You are a presence, and there is nothing more loving, more sacred, more alive than someone who has come home to themselves and stayed. No one prepares you for the in-between. You think healing will bring peace. You imagine clarity will feel like freedom. But what it often brings first is a strange and aching loneliness. You're no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. You've let go of relationships that were built on your silence, but haven't yet found the ones that welcome your voice. You're floating in the middle. No map, no crowd, no applause. Just you, your truth, and the echoes of what used to be. It feels like loss, and it is. Loss of the familiar. Loss of identity. Loss of places where you once felt needed, even if they hurt you. And in that space, it's tempting to go back, to shrink, to apologize, to resurrect the version of you that people liked better. But don't. Don't mistake emptiness for the wrong path. Don't confuse aloneness with failure. This is the wilderness between the wound and the wisdom. The cocoon where your old skin dissolves, but your wings aren't ready yet. It's sacred. It's terrifying. It's necessary. Here you meet the parts of you that were hidden beneath all the roles you played. Here you hear your own voice, maybe for the first time. Here you begin to understand. You were never truly seen before, because you were never fully showing up. And now that you are, the right people will come. Not out of need, not out of convenience, but out of truth, resonance, soul. But first, the in-between. Honor it, breathe through it, let it shape you. You're not lost, you're becoming. There's a quiet miracle that happens after the storm. Not right away, but slowly, subtly, and with grace. When you stop abandoning yourself, new kinds of people begin to appear. Not saviors, not replacements, but mirrors of your growth, your values, your wholeness. And they don't come because you chased them. They come because you aligned. See, when you used to betray yourself, you attracted people who benefited from your absence. People who liked that you always said yes, always gave, always swallowed your needs like pills. But now, you check in with yourself before you commit. Now, you let silence sit where false connection used to live. Now, you'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded in illusion. And something shifts. You start meeting people who don't need you to shrink to love you. People who don't flinch when you say, "I need space," or "That doesn't feel right." People who respect your boundaries without punishment or guilt. They might not flood into your life all at once. You may still spend nights alone, but the quality is different now. Because now, connection is rooted in mutual presence, not mutual wounding. In respect, not obligation. In truth, not performance. These relationships might feel quieter, slower, less intense, more real. And when you look back, you'll realize, the more you came home to yourself, the more the world made room for those who could actually meet you there. So if you're in the space between, waiting, grieving, hoping, hold on. You're not being forgotten. You're being prepared. The love you longed for is not behind you. It's ahead, and it begins with how deeply you choose yourself now. Guilt has a way of creeping in, especially when you walk away from people you once would have bled for. You replay the good moments. You remember the laughter, the loyalty, the years. You ask yourself, maybe I expected too much. Maybe they just didn't know better. And maybe that's true. Maybe they were doing their best, but their best wasn't growing. Their best was staying still. And you were drowning in silence, choking on old patterns, begging for reciprocity in spaces that only echoed your own voice back at you. Here's the truth no one says out loud. You can have deep love for someone, and still outgrow the version of yourself who stayed small to keep them close. You didn't leave because you were cruel. You left because the cost of staying became your own becoming. Growth will always be uncomfortable, but staying stagnant, just to preserve an outdated version of connection, is a quiet form of death. Some people want comfort more than they want change. They prefer the known pain to the unknown possibility. They will look you in the eye and say, "This is just who I am," as if that's a badge of honor, rather than a refusal to evolve. Don't carry shame for walking away from that. You are not abandoning them. You are answering a deeper call, to live in truth, to love with integrity, to rise, even if it meant rising alone. And maybe they'll change one day. Maybe not, but either way, their growth is not your responsibility. You were never meant to be the one who stayed behind just to make them comfortable. You were meant to become. There is a unique kind of grief that comes with healing, not just for the people you've lost, but for the versions of yourself you had to bury to survive. You mourn the girl who never said no, the man who smiled through disappointment, the friend who overgave, hoping to be chosen. You grieve the years spent molding yourself into what others needed, and all the moments when you knew, deep down, this isn't who I am. Loss surrounds you. It lingers in birthdays no longer shared, in phone numbers you don't call, in the empty chair where someone used to sit. And still, beneath all of it, a strange, steady peace begins to rise. Not loud, not sudden, but real. You wake up and feel your breath, without tension. You walk into a room and don't scan for who needs you. You sit alone and for once you're not lonely. Because somewhere along the way, without realizing it, you came back to yourself. Not the self that was, shaped by fear. Not the self that chased love to feel worthy, but the self that remembers. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to change. I am allowed to lose people. If it means I finally stop losing myself. And yes, it hurt. More than you thought it would. More than anyone saw. But now, in the quiet after the storm, you feel it. Relief. Not because everything is perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, you're not pretending. You're here, present, whole, honest, and that is everything you were always seeking in others. You found it in you.